time. '28, this is the reason. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord God, that I may declare all thy works. It's putting him on display again. So who's in us is our preoccupation should be to get to a certain place in God just so we can put him on display. It's not the things that come as a byproduct of putting him on display. Those things come in the process of putting Christ on display. But that's not the ultimate goal. So in the material sense, I'm not trying to be blessed by God just to get a house or just to get a car or just to get a promotion or just to get a spouse. When my focus is promoting God's agenda and taking his name to the world at large, when that's my focus, those things seek me out and attach themselves to me. The blessing of God is making me rich, but it's not just hit or miss things here and there. And as I operate in the will of God and I understand that all things work according to his purpose, as I do his purpose, I can expect everything that I'm looking for to be included in that, because his purpose is higher than anything that I could think of. I want to start to close, but I just want to recap the main points of this. The first thing that a person will have to do is to die to themselves. And that entails receiving Christ. There's only one person that can really steer the vessel. You have to be crucified with Christ. But when you take on Christ and you take on his name, and you take on his nature, and you take on his death, you take on his burial, you also take on his resurrection, and you also take on his glory, because it was God's idea not only to predestinate us and call us and justify us, but it's actually God's idea to glorify us. Not that we get the glory, but the glory belongs to him. In the process, we get glorified. So I don't have to seek glory for me if I know that if I think of a way to give God glory, the glory is going to happen to me in the process. So death to self is the first thing that's required. Number two, allow God to work in you. Ephesians talk about the power that worketh in us. And Philippians talks about he works in us to will and to do his good pleasure. That's working in you. Now, your responsibility also is to put that on display outwardly. He said to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. So you work outwardly the salvation that's already on the inside. If you didn't have it in there, you couldn't work it outwardly. But the reason you work it outwardly is so that people can see what Christ looks like, see what life is supposed to look like. So not only do we just put Christ on display, we verbalize Christ to people. We tell them about Christ. So now if a person sees the blessing of God on somebody and in somebody, and it's made them rich, and they can see it on the outside, and the person is talking about it, you got the maximum witness that you can have in the earth in the midst of a hostile environment, because everything in this earth is working towards promoting Satan's agenda. So what I'm basically doing is I'm in the middle of Satan's camp and have the gall and audacity to set up a righteous thing in front of everybody that's evil. And I'm setting up God's system in the front of everything that should be working in Satan's favor. And that's why you get all this conflict when you try to do the things of God, because the environment that we live in is not conducive for God's will to be manifested outwardly. And the reason it can go like that is because few people will put Christ on display when they've been made rich by the blessing of God. And I believe that's why God won't allow some of that richness to manifest as fast as what we want it, because the mind of what to do with it is not as mature as the desire or as intense as the desire to have that. But when God promotes you and keeps that thing at an equilibrium where your growth and your riches and your mind are stayed on, put Christ on display. Put Christ on display. Tell people about Christ. When they work around the same time, that's when you see promotion happen and the blessings overtake people. It doesn't just, we live just in a blow up mentality. People want to do something and then blow up. They want to sow a big seed and then the next day reap a big harvest. But they don't have the mind of Christ that will allow them to stay sane in the things of God and to retain God in their knowledge. They're doing what James says not to do, consumed upon their lust. And that's not the mind of Christ. So you have to die to yourself. You have to put Christ on outward display. Allow God to work in you. Promote Christ through a verbal witness. Just tell people about Christ, whatever fashion that may be. You can have a conversation. You can record it. You can write a book. You can put it on television. You can put it on audio CD. You have to tell people so they can hear the gospel. That's the only way they're going to get faith. That's the only way they're going to get saved, is so that they can hear it. But why hoard all your riches and spend it on stuff you want and throw the pennies at the promotion of the gospel? Last point, I'll say this again, the better steward and the better ambassadors we are for Christ, the greater the witness we have. If you have a lot that's been entrusted to you, there's a lot required of you. But the requirement is not so high that you're not able to carry that out. Because if God saw fit to put that in your hands and in your capabilities, he's going to equip you with the grace to put it on display properly. He wouldn't bless you with something and require you to do something and then not empower you to be able to carry it out the right way. So the better steward and ambassadors we are for God, the greater the witness we are for him. And what we'll ultimately do is we'll be successful in carrying out the commission to draw men to Christ. We'll bear witness to the unsaved, and we'll get people saved. In the process, though, we'll also edify the body. So we work with both groups of people that exist in the world. We'll evangelize the world, but if personally I'm blessed to the place where I got more than enough resources for myself, and Deacon Ezel preached oneness tonight, the first thing I'm going to do is think of how I can take what the blessing of God has empowered me to do and use it at Ward's Temple. Because I want to get as many people at Ward's Temple freed up to go out and do the same thing that I'm able to do because the blessing of the Lord has made me rich. I want other people to be rich, because if it was just me and I thought me all the time, I wouldn't think to try to make somebody else rich. But that's what's happening. You have people that's able to help somebody else be in a position to be free, to do the things of God without interruption, but they won't let it go because they trust in how they got it, but they don't understand it's the blessing of the Lord that made them rich.